What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ringers NBA Palooza. My name is Chris Ryan. This is Kevin O'Connor. This is Justin Verrier, and we are here to do Group Chat, the beloved NBA show podcast that the Ringer puts out every week. You can subscribe to the Ringer NBA show wherever you get your podcasts and get Kevin twice a week on The Mismatch, Justin and I with Charks on Wednesdays, and John, Haley, and Dan on Mondays with Heat Check, plus Versillo, plus Bill. We got you covered. And we got you covered today because we're going to talk about the NBA. We're going to talk about Kevin's power rankings, which have been going up on the site over the last couple of days. He's been breaking the NBA into tiers, into groups. Kev, what's going on with you, man? Good to see you.
I'm stoked to be here, Chris.
Are you stoked about this? The season is finally starting. Justin, we have a little bit of like a wet firecracker with the Raptors and the Pelicans because Zion's not going to be playing tonight, which is a little disappointing. But we're going to talk a lot about them later. We're going to start talking out by probably the most interesting thing. I edited Kevin's pieces, and I was going through it. I was like, oh, I wonder who Kevin's got number one. I wonder who's got winning the championship. And even then, I was still surprised, Kev, that you've had the Los Angeles Lakers winning the NBA Finals.
It's pretty simple, Chris.
Okay.
They have LeBron James, arguably the greatest player ever, and Anthony Davis, arguably the best big man of this decade.
So you're
with a
buying
good supporting cast.
You're buying their upside, their ceiling over everything.
I think the Clippers are a safer championship pick because of their amount of depth and proven depth and the quality that they had last year. But the Lakers' depth around AD and LeBron, which could be the most dominant pick and roll two-man attack that we've ever seen, I think what they have around that core is pretty good. It's been somewhat underrated heading into the season, but ultimately it comes down to LeBron and AD.
What were you thinking when you saw Lakers over Clippers in Kevin's piece?
I was wondering if this was like 2016, because as good as LeBron and AD are, and I think they will be even better in the playoffs, I don't know who is going to be able to guard Anthony Davis. I'm curious about who are the other guys they're going to put around them. Avery Bradley's a guy that is theoretically going to start and play a big role for this team. Kyle Kuzma isn't even on the court right now, so I don't know who they're going to get to take those open shots.
I think when it comes to the durability aspect, I feel the same way with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. You have Paul George coming off double shoulder surgery. He's not going to play the first 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. Then you have Kawhi, who only 2 years ago had this weird, mysterious leg injury that sort of has gone away, but he says now he doesn't need to be load managed at all.
Right.
That could always come back, just like it did with the Spurs. And so with that team, I look at that as a wash with the questions about durability. With the depth, look, I mean, the Clippers have better depth. That's undeniable. With guys like Patrick Beverley on their roster, the Lakers don't have that. But they do have, someone like Danny Green, who is one of the best 3-and-D players in the league. They do have Avery Bradley, who, look, I know a lot of people hate Avery Bradley, but 38% on catch-and-shoot threes since 2013, a pretty good defender in a matchup against a Curry or a Damian Lillard. And then you have guys like Kuzma, who, love him or hate him, he's a spark plug scorer, and that's what you kind of want as that third cog next to your real linchpins on your team with AD and LeBron James. So you look up and down their roster, they have the ability to play different styles, big or small.
Yeah.
And they have the two of the top 5 players in the league.
So Clippers are like the eco-friendly mode. It's like when you're driving along the highway and you hit the leaf and you're like, I'm saving gas, I'm just cruising along. And you know that they're going to have they have like an optimized playoff team. 2 incredible generational talent wing defenders, and then a really nice supporting cast around them. How do you feel about them going into the season?
I probably feel better about them than the Lakers because of the reasons that you mentioned, but I do think there are more question marks than people are really considering with this team. I think they have a lot of options, especially in crunch time. They have guys like Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams can get thrown in there. They have a bunch of bigs. They have depth, which a lot of these big 2 teams just don't have. On the other hand, they have a lot of options, but they don't have guys that are going to be there in crunch time. This is the type of team that could theoretically get Andre Iguodala in there, but for now, I'm just wondering who they're going to get because Paul George isn't probably going to play like the first 10 games of the season because of the shoulder surgeries that he had. So you really only have Kawhi and a couple other ball handlers, Lou, maybe Patrick Beverley, and just like in a diminutive role.
Yeah, you were saying like Terrence Mann might play a lot, right?
They really need a point guard.
Yeah,
he could eventually carve out being the 9th or 10th guy on the team.
CP3 coming home. Come on, who says no?
I think with the Clippers though, I honestly feel like their lack of another ball handler has been overstated in a little bit because like Lou Will, 6th man of the year, I mean he's at least going to be in the conversation. Patrick Beverley can at least handle the point guard reps for you, and then Kawhi Leonard's going to dominate the ball with Paul George, being second fiddle behind him and playing off Kawhi. I think they have enough weapons on that roster where for me, it's more like, well, can they find that other wing defender in Iguodala? Can they find another big man who might be an upgrade over Zubats for like a Jokic Nuggets series?
Yeah,
they're close to perfect.
I'm just curious, though, if you put Lou in that situation, especially in crunch time, are you sacrificing more on the defensive end?
That's true.
And if you don't have Paul George, then you're going to open yourself up to him. But I do have just faith in the Clippers organization, which is probably why I think the Clippers are in a better position than the Lakers, because all those guys on the fringes, the Terrence Manns and some of these draft picks that the Clippers have brought along, like they've shown that they could do that. I don't know about the Lakers. They've kind of.
You're not a Dwight Howard fan?
Not a big Dwight Howard fan. They put their faith.
He looks lean, dude.
Yeah, I know, and his hair looks fantastic.
Reverse muscle
these days.
watch, yeah.
But like they're hoping that these retreads kind of refine something that they've lost over the past few seasons.
Or that they get the LeBron and AD bounce. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are also pretty good.
Yeah, so what I want to ask is, we're talking about the battle for Los Angeles. That's the second game tonight, is the first Clippers-Lakers clash. There's like 400 people who've been credentialed for the Clippers game. It's going to be an absolute madhouse there. Is the battle for Los Angeles actually the battle for the NBA title, or do other teams here have a shot? And I'm talking specifically about the the sort of favorites in the East, which are the Bucks and the Sixers. Are they in the conversation for the title, or do you think the Clippers and the Lakers have some separation from the rest of the field?
I think it's absolutely the case that there are maybe 8 to 10 teams that you can make a strong argument for.
Really?
That could win a title. I mean, they need like either a player to develop, or they need to add a guy, or they just need something to break right for them in postseason series, hot shooting streak and ankle turns or something like that.
Sure.
But I think there's strong cases to be made. To me, it's just Lakers and Clippers, and then Bucks and Sixers, respectively, in each conference, are the two favorites, but they're not like a Warriors level favorite or a Miami Heat with LeBron level favorite. They're not quite at that level, which means that for the first time, at least in as long as I can remember, we're entering the season without like that clear head and shoulders above everybody else favorite. So it's a battle for Los Angeles, but not necessarily battle for the title. I think there's a lot of teams that could knock them off.
And by that same token, do you think that the Eastern Conference is a two-team race, or do you think it's more wide open than that?
No, I think these are the only two teams that should be there. I mean, the Celtics are going to be interesting, but again, there's just like once you. Did I hit a nerve there?
I didn't say anything.
I would agree in the East. It's, with Philly and Milwaukee, they're further ahead than the other teams in the West, because like Utah, Denver, Houston, you can make arguments for a bunch of teams.
Yeah.
That second tier is just a lot better in the West. I mean, we were talking about the Heat as a potential like number 3 team in the East, and like I have no faith in the Heat as like a big time playoff team, but all of a sudden like in the regular season they can stack a bunch of wins, because that's how bad that conference is.
Yeah, I think that it's been interesting because, like Kevin said, that the idea that there's all this parity, and I do think on any given night, a Mavs can beat a Lakers. You know what I mean? Like, there's not going to be any kind of like, oh, this is just a check every night. Like, check these ones off as W's. But at the same time, if I'm being honest with myself, I wake up in the mirror and I'm like, who's going to be there at the end? It's these four. It's these 4 teams, right? And it's like the collection of talent in these 4 teams. And you talked about this, Kevin. I think when I actually was like looking at your pieces, I was like, oh man, like these are the guys right here. And without Clay, you have to feel like the Warriors have taken a step out of the title contention, without Kevin, obviously. And then I think in the East, so I want to talk a little bit about these 2 teams. I'm not concerned trolling where I ask this sincerely and genuinely. Is there any drop off in second year Bud? Basically, the year after the oh my guys, my eyes are falling out of my head, these guys have changed the way they play. Because that sort of happened a little bit with that Atlanta team. That Atlanta team did not have Giannis. Do you see any signs of slip for the Bucks?
Not yet, but I do wonder over the course of the season will we see that. I mean, what they do now is not new, right? I mean, last season they were sort of innovative in how they baited average three-point shooters to take more threes. Ben Falk wrote about that, incredibly well on cleaning the glass, and it's fascinating to watch them really just, try to, leave open a 34% three-point shooter. But now, will teams adjust in some way over the course of the season to use that against them with how they're going to defend dropping Brook Lopez in the pick and roll? I don't know. I haven't seen it yet in preseason, but over the course of the year, there's a whole year of film for teams to really counter that. Never mind the fact that they did lose Malcolm Brogdon, who is sometimes their second best player, right next to Chris Middleton behind Giannis last season. He's if you're talking about all the offseason changes that happened, he's probably one of the more underrated and overlooked losses.
He happened in that like crazy sea of like 94 Woj bombs, and everybody's like, oh wait, Brogdon's on the Pacers now? Like, how did that happen?
I think the race for the best player of all time, I think it's Jordan, I think it's LeBron, and then I think it's Malcolm Brogdon. At least if you work at the Ringer, because I've heard about this guy nonstop for the past like 5 months, but he's very
awesome.
good. I mean, he was like 50, 40, 90 guy, kind of under the radar, and he really kind of keyed that offense around Giannis, and now they're kind of, the margin for error is just much thinner. You're dealing with guys like Pat Connaughton. You need Dante DiVincenzo to like kind of step forward and be that heat check sort of.
Coming through.
You need that ball. Like Eric Bledsoe can't lay an egg like he did in the postseason last year.
Totally.
Or Giannis, and like we had this in the article today, Giannis's playmaking needs to break through. That like everybody talks about his shooting, and rightfully so, but he's gotten better over time as a shooter. He shot around 34% on dribble jumper threes since Christmas last year. His form looks better. He's worked at it, but his passing has remained pretty stagnant. And there were times in the series last year against Toronto where they just clogged the paint.
It was
with 4 or 5
nuts.
guys.
They built a wall. Yeah,
exactly. And he needs to get even just 10% better, and that's going to create more shots.
So here's my question: Giannis gets 10% better. Does that make the Bucks title winners?
Can we expect that?
I don't know.
Everyone thinks that Giannis is going to keep making leaps, but he's already
if he makes a leap, he's Wilt. You know what I mean? Like,
and everyone expects the three-pointer to come along, and maybe it will, but we also thought that with Anthony Davis, and a couple of years later, he's still trying to figure that out. So I don't know. It seems like the Bucks are a team kind of trying to keep things together and hoping that they could just recreate the success of last season. And the Sixers, I say, feel like a team on the rise.
Your Venmo payment is in transit. It'll be confirmed as soon as this podcast is over. Let's talk about the Sixers, a team on the rise.
Do we all? So I had them 3 ahead of Milwaukee.
I appreciated that.
You agree, Justin, with that?
If we're talking playoffs, yes, I think the Nuggets could potentially just stack wins next year.
All right. So in the East, though, I think with Philly, like I'm more fascinated to watch them than any other team this season because of just the sheer size on their roster. There's going to be times where Josh Richardson is the smallest guy on the floor at 6'6" with long 7-foot wingspan, and you're going to have 3 guys that are around 7 feet tall. One of them, Ben Simmons, who is one of the better overall defenders in the whole league. This team, with this group, with Horford next to Embiid and backing him up, with Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, Richardson.
Is Matisse Thybulle a top 5 NBA player right now? Right today.
You think him or Brogdon is in the race for 3?
Well, I mean, you noticed like so Michael Jordan came out and said he didn't think that Steph Curry was a Hall of Famer yet.
Sure.
He didn't say that about Thybulle. And by omission, I think we can suggest that maybe he's already. Have you seen Thybulle's D?
No, because it's the preseason. I'm not watching Matisse Thybulle clips like at midnight in the middle of October. Apparently, that's what everyone else is doing.
Get off of TikTok.
Okay.
Go on YouTube and watch the octopus come around dudes and just take the ball whenever he wants.
Yeah.
This is Kawhi without the headaches. Kawhi without the locker room drama.
I mean, he's one of the guys on this roster that makes them have the ability to lock down any team.
Yeah.
They can play with jumbo lineups. They can have lengthy switchable lineups with Thybulle and Richardson on the perimeter and Simmons. They could be one of the best defenses we've seen this century.
We know what they're going to. Their ceiling for defense, like you said, is historic. It's like 04 Pistons is the ceiling.
Historic. We're already going there.
Well, I mean,
It is. It doesn't mean they'll get there, but the ceiling.
They could be pretty good. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Name your favorite defense of all time?
The Steel Curtain.
Good.
The 19 Patriots.
The United States Army. How about that? Huh? Pretty good defense.
Yeah.
What about their offense?
I have more questions.
Yes.
If Thybulle is going to be the next Kawhi Leonard, he also needs to be able to hit a jump shot because I don't know who else
It
is
took
going
Kawhi
to.
a minute to hit jump shots.
Yeah, it took him a little while, but
Yeah.
his other teammates also could hit those.
Yes.
So that helped a little bit. And so I wonder, Ben Simmons obviously is taking threes, or at the very least,
we'll
just
see about
in
that.
an empty gym.
He's putting TikToks up about it. Yes.
Right. Embiid, a guy who is prone to just like roam the perimeter and just like not get into the post where he should be all the time.
That's because of Ben, though. That's
Sure.
because Ben Simmons shoots with the wrong hand, and he's not reliable from the perimeter, so he needs to play inside. Like
How different is it going to look this year?
Well, they're probably going to stagger them, right? And if you
gotta.
keep them separated for most of the regular season, I think that could be incredible.
Right.
But eventually you're going to have to play these guys together, and it's not only Ben and Joel, it's Ben, Joel, and Al Horford. That's a lot of girth.
How do you stagger Horford with Embiid and then Embiid with Simmons though? I mean, like that seems like that's a challenge.
So
for
the
Brett
question
Brown
I
to
think
figure out.
is like how successful can they be if this, all caveats aside about position-free basketball and unicorns and like think with your fourth eye or whatever, like how successful can this team be if the crunch time offense is Embiid 25 feet from the hoop and Simmons being isolated as a dunker?
That's where Josh Richardson needs to be that guy, him and Tobias Harris, that they step up and they can be the person running pick and roll into games. It's really, in my eyes, as simple as that. These guys need to prove that they can be an on-ball presence late in games. Because you're not going to need that every night because your defense is going to be holding teams to like 90 and your offense is going to do just enough. But there's going to be a lot of nights, especially against teams like the Lakers and the Clippers and Nuggets and Jazz, all these really good teams, that you're going to need a bucket from a guy who can just create on the ball. And that's where Jimmy Butler will be missed. But I think ultimately with this team, I wonder how creative Brett Brown gets. I mean, what does he do with their size? And how much does size really matter on the offensive end of the floor?
You guys have both been talking about this for a few months. Well, like, what do you think?
I think it will work in the Eastern Conference. I'm less convinced that it will work against some of these teams like the Lakers and the Clippers.
In a finals.
Yeah, I think Kevin hit it. I think it's a big season for Brett Brown to really prove that he can kind of make this work. I also think it's a big season for Elton Brand. You have these giants kind of trying to figure things out together. But like I said, in the playoffs, I don't know if I want Al Horford, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons on the court all at the same time. So I wonder, about a lot of these teams we're going to talk about, but specifically the Sixers, are they a team that should make a trade in order to make things work a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question because I think, Kevin, this next group of teams that Kevin was talking about, the potential greatness teams, and these are sort of like the 5 through 9 group, and they're all, I would say probably their win totals are between 50 and 45, this big group of them, and they're all Western Conference teams. You've got the Nuggets, the Rockets, the Jazz, the Trailblazers, and the Golden State Warriors. And obviously the Golden State Warriors, it was reported officially today that Klay Thompson is likely to miss the rest of the entire NBA season. Steve Kerr came out and said, look, like there had been some talk about March or April, but realistically, like it takes a year, right?
I think until it's March and we hear for sure that he's out, if Golden State's in the bubble, and if Klay feels like he's 100% and doctors say he's 100% at that point, well, we'll see.
Right. Yeah, so we don't even this will be a completely different Warriors team than the one we're used to. But I'm talking specifically about Nuggets, Rockets, Jazz, and Blazers. These were teams that you thought could use maybe a deal somewhere. They either need a deal in the midseason or they need one of their sort of rising players to pop.
Yeah,
right?
Especially in regards to Portland, right? I think they're a team, how many years in a row now have they been in the playoffs and just hit a wall? And that's not necessarily their fault. Golden State existed for them. But I think this year with this team, Hassan Whiteside, he's not going to be the guy to swing their fortunes, but he could be the guy that they use to add a player.
It seems like the 2017 Heat are very influential on the NBA all of a sudden with Whiteside and Richardson.
But ultimately with Portland, they're that team that, in my opinion, needs a move. I think you look at Utah and you look at Denver, those teams as they exist right now, I think there's an argument to be made that they can knock off the Lakers or Clippers, especially Utah.
I just wonder, I mean, this is a very reductive view of just like the NBA, but like at the end of the day, like the Lakers have LeBron and AD when Utah is throwing out there Donovan Mitchell, a guy who can do it.
It's pound for pound versus heavyweights, right?
Yeah, like I think both of those teams, Denver and Utah, are going to be fantastic in the regular season. I wouldn't be surprised if they're 1-2 in the standings, but like I'm not going to discount LeBron in a playoff series and Anthony Davis, who, even though he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities in the playoff, has been just incredible, historic in terms of just production.
Yeah, I mean, like with Utah, just to look at them, Mike Conley is not going to be the guy that you're looking at like, oh, he's going to, elevate them to become a championship team. But with the team he's going to, with the infrastructure that they have there, I think you can say that because of what they needed was somebody to take pressure off of Mitchell, who, all the criticism that he has rightfully received as being inefficient, some poor decision making. He was in his second year last year.
Yeah.
And now he has Mike Conley, one of the best pick and roll playmakers and scorers of the last 8-9 years with Memphis, taking that pressure off him, creating with Bojan Bogdanovic now, with Joe Ingles, and then Rudy Gobert, one of the best roll men in the league. That offense now, to me, has top 5 potential with already what should be one of the best defenses in basketball. They're they're really, really interesting now because of Conley.
I think Gobert is the question mark for me. Is he going to be their ultimate advantage or their disadvantage? Because as we've seen in the playoffs, he gets played off the floor sometimes. They did a better job of it last year, even though they lost against Houston. But I'm still wondering in a series against a Clippers team where you could throw out just like 5 switchable wings, like who is he guarding on that team?
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this, because I think within the sort of like, we're broadcasting from Los Angeles, you've got a couple of teams out there in LA and New York and Philly and Boston where the local media and the national media pays a lot of attention to these teams and tends to put a lot of scrutiny. We were already talking about like, this is a crucial season for Brett Brown, right? Like that is like a reflection of the scrutiny that's being placed on the Sixers. These teams, the Nuggets and the Rockets, or rather the Nuggets, the Jazz, and the Blazers, tend to be a little bit outside, not disregarded entirely, but just like a little bit outside that scrutiny. Which of those teams, and you could throw the Rockets and the Warriors in here as well, which of these teams do you think has the highest expectations with that in mind? Because like, my experiences with the Nuggets and Jazz fans that I know is that they're like, man, we're just like, we have high expectations, but there's maybe a certain realism to like what they're talking about. And maybe also like, they're not like, I'm going to be crestfallen if we're not touching Larry O'Brien at the end of the season.
It can't be Golden State because of their circumstances.
Yeah, those guys can't complain until like 2027.
I think it has to be Houston.
Yeah.
Has to be Houston. Adding Russell Westbrook
Yeah.
with that weird mix and the amount of pressure that it feels like is building after the issues between Chris Paul and James Harden resulting in the trade, with all the stuff in the front office, with D'Antoni's entire coaching staff for the most part being fired, him joking about being only on a 1-year deal, maybe taking a Hawaiian vacation by December. I mean, there's this team feels like they're on thin ice.
Who did they
right
bring
now.
in? Do you guys know who they brought in? Like on anybody else on the
I don't
coaching
know.
staff?
No, because they probably just didn't bring it in.
You guys aren't an assistant coach Reddit?
It's literally just D'Antoni on the bench. That's it.
Yeah. So I mean, the Houston question is this the end of something or the beginning of something new?
Yeah.
Because it feels, big picture, like we're winding this down a little bit, and that the last person standing there is just going to be Harden.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the 2 superstars, but I'm honestly curious, just like, why is this team held together pretty much by PJ Tucker, and is like whether or not he's eaten a lot of pancakes that day?
Their over-under is 53.5 as of yesterday. So it's like they think that this is going to be the same team that it was last year.
Right, and
Vegas does.
I think that's a good bet, because as we saw last season, they really just needed a couple of guys as opposed to what they had earlier in the season where it was just injury riddled, and they just decided to just throw a bunch of dice rolls to put around James Harden.
Do they have a couple guys?
I mean, Eric Gordon is back.
Austin Rivers.
Austin
Pretty
Rivers
good.
is better than what they had earlier that season.
So Austin's the 6th man, right?
Unless you want to count Eric Gordon,
Okay.
It depends on who's starting and whatnot. But they got Chris Clemens coming deep off the
I
bench.
don't know who that is. I got to be completely honest. I'm standing here and I don't know who that guy is, and I'm saying that's kind of strange. I mean, I believe in Daryl's ability to find these guys off the pile, but like this is a pretty thin team.
Yeah, they're dealing with a much more thin margin for error than in the past. Although I think like the Westbrook signing is something that could potentially just be really great for them, at least in the regular season. I think Russ just playing with the second unit could be like, you could be the Thunder basically.
As an indication to how poisoned my mind is right now, I was like, I realized I was watching Tyler Hero highlights, and I realized I was like, who's this guy D'ing up Tyler Hero? Oh, it's Russell Westbrook. Like, what's wrong with me that I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like the guy who's D'ing him up is Westbrook.
Are you buying Westbrook, his change in preseason, shooting more threes, like dribbling behind the line, not pulling up from mid-range with 18 seconds left on the shot clock? Do you buy that this continues, or does it reach a point where he's shooting like 26% from 3 and he's like, screw it, I'm gonna go shoot 36% from mid-range?
So what's the number that he has to hit from 3 to make it worth it?
30%.
And he's not even there. It could be bad.
I think he could get there. Right?
Yeah, I mean, he has the ability. I don't know what the hell happened.
This is the best
last
shooting
year.
team he's ever been on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that I will give him the benefit of the doubt. I know that there are a lot of people who are doubting whether this is going to be successful, but I think that if you look back on those Thunder rosters and people kill Russ for it, and I know that I'm typically defend Russ a lot. I just think that this is he just did not have a lot of guys on the arc to pass to, and I think now he does. So let's see what happens.
I mean, glass half full is that he's trying. which is the big thing about him for the past decade.
Also, he's going to be mauling second units probably if they play the same staggered minute style, right?
And that's what's really exciting to me about seeing Westbrook.
Seeing him destroy second units. Congrats, Russ.
It's
You did
gonna
it,
be
man.
awesome.
You smoked this CBA player.
It's going to be great, just like Chris Paul killed second units last year.
Right.
And he did. Chris Paul was really good when James Harden was off the floor against those bench units. And with Westbrook, he at least adds some variety to their offense where he's going to push the ball, try to get to the rim in transition, kick the ball out for threes. The half court, we'll see how that develops over the course of the season. But it's like we said with Milwaukee, them baiting average shooters into taking threes. At what point do teams just ignore Westbrook when Harden has the ball at the top of the key, and then they just help off Westbrook, who's like 31% standing in the corner for a three?
I want to get out of this group, but first I want to ask, is it possible that we are almost underrating Denver at this point?
I mean, it's possible.
Like, I just, from the perspective of, like, people are obviously very high on the LA teams. The Rockets are probably the most, like, kind of salacious team to watch. Denver is bringing back essentially the team that exploded out of the West and was so impressive last year. Maybe not as great in the playoffs as we thought they would be. But do you think that this team has got serious title? Like, could they make it to the finals?
They could. I'm very bullish on them as a regular season team. I am also very bullish on Nikola Jokic as like a MVP candidate as a result of that.
He's awesome.
Just because, he has so much room to grow. I think we forget how young he is, how young guys like Gary Harris, Jamal Murray is. They could pretty much just roll out the team that they had from last year and win the West. And on top of that, they got a guy like Jeremy Grant, who Kevin has written about, is just like the perfect fit for that team. And it also makes Paul Millsap a little bit more expendable. You don't really have to rely on him as much as they had on defense in the past. And Michael Porter Jr. is like this huge wild card. Like, what are they going to get out of him? Because 2-3 years ago, we were talking about him as a potential number one overall pick.
He's not in the rotation to start the season, it sounds like.
It seems like if what Michael Malone did in his final preseason game, he will not be to start the year.
Is he going Michael now? Like, kind of like cousin Greg changed it to Gregory?
He wants Michael Malone.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and with Michael Porter, though, like, if he's with him, to me, it's about defense. Because he looked horrible on the defensive end in preseason. Yeah. Can he become a reliable defender? Because he can bring it offensively, that's for sure.
Yes or no, really quick, and who is it? Can the MVP come from this group of teams?
Yeah.
And who is it?
Stephen Curry.
Yes?
Yes, and Jokic.
Yes, love you.
Yeah.
Eastern Conference, so that's the second tier of the Western Conference, right? And I think we're all pretty confident that there's little margin for error among the LA teams to screw up because this group is really, really strong in a lot of different ways. The Eastern Conference, like we said, a little bit more separation between Philly and Milwaukee and the next group down, and that next group includes the Heat, the Celtics, the Nets, and the Pacers. I feel like the Heat are like WeWork stock right now. Like everybody is smashing the Heat.
Yeah.
They got Tyler Herro out here winning Rookie of the Year in Zion's absence. Everybody loves it. Bam Adebayo playing point Bam, whatever.
Justice Winslow.
Winslow. I can't tell if this is just if everybody's hitting some fumes that I don't know about. Like I watched the Heat. Like is this decidedly different because of Jimmy?
Yeah. It's got to be because of Jimmy. You saw him in Philly last year. There's some ups, there's some downs, but there's no doubt he's going to do two things for you.
Peaks and valleys.
Yeah, he's going to get buckets, and he's going to defend, and he's going to set the tone.
He's like
for
okay.
that
He's pretty good at defending.
Yeah, not what he once was in his
Yes.
prime Chicago days.
I think this team has to be good on defense because it's a lot of guys that like seem like they have potential and they do one or two things well that you wouldn't expect them to, but I don't know how they all fit together. Justice Winslow is built almost like a mini Zion, but at some point is like a point guard, I guess now. You have a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. who looks like a wing, but I guess he's a center, and it's just like...
Can't we just say that Zion's a big Justice Winslow?
I like that. I like that spin on it.
I have like the biggest basketball crush on Justice Winslow.
Yeah.
I want to see him in the Draymond role. I just want to see him in the Draymond role.
Yeah.
Just have him play some five.
Yep.
They look
short
very,
roll,
very
space
bouncy
floor.
and
Ooh.
exciting. Like I think they're going to be actually like unlike some past Miami Heat teams, pretty fun to watch.
I think the key with this team and a lot of teams in this little grouping here is what does the coaching staff do? Like, is Spoelstra going to be the guy that we all expect him to do to bring out the best of this like kind of weirdo lineup? And Brad Stevens, another guy who we all expect to be able to make a lot out of perhaps not the best ingredients.
I want to have like a little bit of a take a step back conversation here about Boston.
Let's do it.
Because here we are after years and years and years about hearing about Dealer Danny, and man, the Celtics, they're set up for the present and the future. And they like so much optionality, draft picks, but they're also a free agency destination. So now here we are. Kevin has them at 11. Is their window closed? Is Boston's window as a title contender closed? Shout out to my guy Jackson over there. Keep it right here. Keep it right here. Is the window closed?
No.
Is this now a mid-tier team?
It is closed quite a lot, but it's not closed.
So there's still you can kind of see out the bottom of the window.
Look, with Boston, they have a good team still. It's not what they had hoped it would be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what we had thought it could be.
Right. Yeah.
Or Bill, 67-win team.
Yeah.
But this team still has a lot of youth on it, a lot of young talent. I think Jason Tatum, look, Gordon Hayward, it's critical for him to get back to being Gordon Hayward. He looked better in preseason, more aggressive, getting to the basket. But Tatum is really the guy who can swing this team to actually entering a conversation next to Philadelphia and Milwaukee. If he can become that consistent 20-point-per-game scorer, in addition to everything else that he's really good at, defense, he's gotten better as a passer, playing off ball, then suddenly you have a real interesting mix with Boston. But right now, until we see that happen, no, they're not at that level.
Would you like to rebut that at all?
I think their window closed. I'm with you. Who's the title piece here? I think they did a good job of kind of rebounding from the Kyrie thing, which nobody could really see coming. They made all the right moves in order to get Kyrie. They didn't give up a lot for him. It seemed like Anthony Davis wanted to play with Kyrie. Everything fell into place. You can't really control a guy's decision. I just don't know on this team who's that next guy. I'm not totally sold on Tatum as being a superstar on a title-winning team.
Well, that's going to be the thing. They just extended Jaylen Brown, so they obviously feel good about this group to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And Jaylen and Jason are going to be on the wings, and I now at some point now I'm almost talking myself into the Kemba being almost underrated at this point because we've kind of completely wiped away Kemba's impact on this team, and I'm talking myself into this live on camera. I do think that there's something to the fact that Kemba Walker is going to make these guys feel a little bit better about coming to work every day. Versus what Kyrie did.
Yeah, no, I get that. There's definitely going to be that effect.
And there's no stat for that.
I've heard too many stories about the campfires they had in China during the FIBA World Cup, where they traded stories about their youth and all.
Did they really?
Stuff. No, I'm just making this up. But it's just getting along with your coworkers can only bring you that far when you just don't have a guy who can just take over in the final quarters.
Well, you come to work every day with me, and if I was
and I hate you.
The world is flat, you'd probably be man, I gotta go to the Athletic.
I want to read that blog post.
It's Kemba, though. It's Kemba. This is a guy whose best teammates ever in Charlotte are Al Jefferson for 1 year and Nick Batum the 1 year he was good.
There was a 7-game run of Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and I think that we were all really excited. It was just the shoulders, man.
Yeah. He was the next Draymond. I think we wrote that on the Ringer.
Did
actually.
we really?
Yes, we did.
We got about 17 minutes left.
Oh, thanks, Jason. Hey, man, we'll get to the Mavericks in just a second. Let's keep it moving. I want to ask just really quickly about, since we're talking a little bit about Kyrie and workplace stuff, how good does Brooklyn have to be to keep Kyrie happy this year? Because obviously, this isn't a little way. They remind me a little bit of the Warriors situation, where it's in some ways it's everything is a positive this year. It's if LeVert develops, if Jarrett plays well, if these guys around the younger guys continue to grow, that's just good. And maybe in the East, they should be a playoff team, I would think, right?
The bar is just so low. I feel like if Kyrie just lives next to a good ayahuasca bar, he'll probably be fine for a year as he waits for Kevin Durant to come.
Right.
This team just doesn't have much else beyond Kyrie to really get excited about. I think their season's going to depend on how good Karis LeVert is as in that number 2 chair next to him for a season, but then everything changes the following year. So it's really tough to put expectations on them when everything seems to be geared toward
I definitely have, are we sure they need Durant when they have LeVert saved in drafts? I'm just kidding, I don't.
Not excited about Joe Harris, spacing the floor, Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan rumbling down the lane.
You're pretty high on this team, aren't you?
Yeah, I like it.
We're
I
in
like
Brooklyn
him.
black today.
I really like this Brooklyn core that they have, and then you factor in Kyrie, who is a significant upgrade over D'Angelo Russell. Contrary to some of the conversation this summer, he's just a far better overall player at playmaking, at shooting from the perimeter. He's going to elevate this overall pretty solid infrastructure there quite a lot. And if KD can be 75, 80% of his former self next season, or 100%, this team's going to be right there next to Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and the 2 LA teams.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about some teams that are probably in that 7-8 seed, if making the playoffs at all, and there's a lot more questions about them than there is answers. This is the the group that Kevin called on the fence, and it's the Spurs, the Raptors, the Magic, the Thunder, and the Pistons. I feel like the is the Spurs dynasty over thing is a real, like, are we stuck in a time loop? How many times are we going to have this conversation? Would you say that this Spurs team is going to be better than the one last year?
Yeah, because adding the DeJounte Murray back to that mix.
So does that mean they make the playoffs?
They're going to be right on the bubble. I think they're an 8 seed, 7 or an 8 seed if they get in. But ultimately, so much of that depends on, does another team in that same group make a move? Does Dallas go out and add a guy? Does Sacramento overachieve and add somebody? Does Oklahoma City keep their guys? Right? I mean, like there's a lot of variables with San Antonio, but they're also one of those teams where you could see them go one way or the other. They could add somebody using one of their young pieces, or they could decide, you know what? Aldridge has 1 year left. DeRozan can be a free agent this summer. Maybe we're better off making this the best asset available in the market for like a Detroit to go out and get, for them to, because I think there's some logic to San Antonio doing that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they will, and I doubt they will, but there's logic to it.
I mean, the whole thing with San Antonio for decades now is there's a cost certainty. You know what to expect, even when the names change, that they're just going to play a certain way and they're going to win regular season games.
And that they'll beat the teams that are worse than them, which I think is what like Bill and Ryan were talking about a lot on over-unders, is just this idea that they are reliably going to beat the teams that aren't prepared to play them on any given night.
Right, and as we kind of get closer to the regular season, some of the wires are starting to show on certain teams. Golden State is a team that like isn't even going to have like Willie Cauley-Stein and Kevon Looney perhaps to start the season, and all of a sudden you're like, who's the fourth best player on this team? Is it Glenn Robinson the third, who like couldn't make an impact on like the Pistons?
I actually thought when they signed him, it was Glenn Robinson like the fourth. Like we had already gone to Glenn Robinson the third's son had come into the league, and I missed it.
And then like Zion is gone for 20 games, so I already didn't feel good about the Pelicans as a playoff team, and all of a sudden that they might not be there. So I think if those type of things happen, the Spurs are right there to take advantage of it. And has that not been the case for like the past 5 years with this team?
Okay. Am I wild to think that the Thunder are much more competitive than we're giving them credit for this season?
No, not at all, Chris.
Okay.
But the thing is like, do they keep their guys or not? Do they keep Chris Paul, Danilo Gallinari, Steven Adams? Do they keep those guys? If they do, yeah, they're going to be competitive, man. They just added Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they have like some nice infrastructure behind that. Terrence Ferguson, Andre Robertson. They have a good team on paper.
I love the 3PG lineup that they've been playing. I do. I think that's like, it's just so fun to watch the ball whip around like that. And like, I think that there's such a cool mix of like Paul's veteran game with Shai's just like, you don't know what you're going to get on any position. I am actually going to probably watch more Thunder this season than I did last season, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's just more unknown with this team. I want to know what Shai looks like, not only as kind of the guy for a franchise, but also playing off of Chris Paul and perhaps Dennis Schroeder. It's just, there's a lot for them to figure out on the fly, but at the same time, it just feels like Paul is just a ticking time bomb. I don't know like how long he's going to want to go along and get along and just like go to the same steakhouse every day and just be fine with not playing.
He has to. I mean, I think he's a smart guy. Like he knows what his contract is.
And I also wonder, like Gallo. Yeah, there are a lot of fours out there. It seems on the that could be gettable on this market. The Knicks have 30 of them.
Yes.
But it seems like Gallo's the one who could really raise the ceiling of a team like the Blazers, the Rockets, if they really wanted to go out there and swing something.
It's interesting because with like Chris Paul, it's going to be hard to trade him. So few teams need a point guard. So few teams would want a 34-year-old point guard making $35 to $40 million the next 3 years. But with OKC, I do think the opportunity is going to be there for Chris Paul to look more like Chris Paul. And for OKC, you had better be hoping that Toronto decides we're going to keep this core intact and we're going to try to make another run with what we have, even though we don't have Kawhi anymore. Because if Kyle Lowry were to go on the market, nobody's going to want Chris Paul.
Right.
Nobody in that case.
Because you get 1 year of Lowry at 30 versus paying however $80 million for the rest of Paul, right?
Absolutely. So with OKC, you had better hope Toronto decides to keep trying to build and make another run. Siakam makes a leap, and Masai's like, I'm not pulling the plug here.
I want to speed this up a little bit because we have a bunch of teams to get through, or a couple more of these tiers to get through. It's funny, the teams that we just talked about, like San Antonio, Toronto, Orlando, we didn't even talk about Orlando, Oklahoma, and Detroit. We never really talked about Detroit. Those teams are probably better off than these four teams, but we are much more, as I think, a group of people enamored with these next four teams, and that's the Pelicans, the Mavericks, the Kings, and the Timberwolves, right? Because there's so much of the unknown, there's so much promise, there's so much, what could Zion be? What could Luka and KP be? What could Towns look like this year if Saunders is actually running like a little bit more of a modern system? Let me put it this way. Best next 5 years of this group of teams, New Orleans, Dallas, Sacramento, Minnesota. When we get 5 years ahead, who would you like to have in 5 years? Who would you like to be running? Or who would you like to be a fan of?
Is it recency bias to not say New Orleans because of the injury, or is it logical to say you're looking at a guy who's 280 pounds, 6'6"?
So we're talking about Zion here.
Yes, Zion
right, out for
Williamson.
6 to 8 weeks, tore his meniscus.
Yes. Is it
Lot of
recency
debate.
bias or logical? Because otherwise, the clear answer would be New Orleans. But because of what just happened, it's like, well, maybe it's Dallas because of Luka, because of KP, because of their cap flexibility coming up, because of the assets that they could eventually try to flip.
I don't know. I mean,
Is
like the
Dallas-
KP stuff, it's like he's gone through 2 years of leg injuries.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
it's like we're not holding that against
Bingo.
him in this question.
And that's what I mean. Like it's I think it is recency bias. I think you have to go with New Orleans here because even if Zion goes full leftovers here and disappears, they still have a pretty good overall team. It was
funny, man. Laugh. Let it out. It's good stuff.
with Lonzo Ball.
Shout out to Lindelof. Let's go.
Great show. With Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, and the two guys that they got from the Lakers. Then Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who, by the way, everybody's talking about Tyler Hero. Alexander-Walker was better.
Nobody's
in the
actually
preseason.
talking about Tyler Hero. This is
Okay,
this
fine.
is complete-
NBA Twitter,
Yeah.
all the nerds,
Yeah.
us included, are talking about Tyler Hero. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker was the second best rookie in preseason behind Zion Williamson. He was awesome.
Justin, you have long ties to the New Orleans area. You're former New Orleans Pelicans beat writer.
Sure.
What's your team for the next 5 years here? Is it either Dallas or New Orleans for you?
I want to say New Orleans, but this past day or 24 hours has really given me some nightmares that I experienced in New Orleans, where it's just like Anthony Davis had all the talent in the world, but he just couldn't stay on the court. And all of a sudden, before he even gets a chance to play in his first game, Zion Williamson's already dealing with a pretty significant injury. And while I agree with Kevin, maybe it's a little bit of recency bias, but this is kind of a worry that has been mounting with Zion for at least a year or so. He missed some preseason. He had the thing in college. I'm just
It's the physicality with which he plays that I think is freaking people out. As somebody who has cheered for a team that has watched multiple Rookie of the Year candidates just not play their first year, like Joel and Ben. Fultz, I think that Fultz being aside, we tend to I think we're freaking out a little bit about Zion because it's almost like Anthony Davis. When he seems to get injured, it seems to be very scary, whereas I think that honestly, people come back from meniscus pretty easily, right?
I think that the flip side to that argument
Twitter doc right here.
is with Luka Doncic. He's the best prospect of anybody in this group.
Well,
he's a better prospect than Zion, in my opinion.
Yeah, let me push against that. Is Towns better though? That's what I'm wondering.
Dr. Zag right here.
Towns is also in his prime now, and I think there are a lot of questions about how the Wolves are going to be able to take best advantage of that, and it's going to be particularly complicated because they have Andrew Wiggins, just a not even top 100 player.
You want some preseason numbers? Andrew Wiggins in preseason, 19.1 minutes, shot 33.3% from the floor, 31.6% from three, and averaged only 9.8 points, despite this new system.
Come on, man. He's
he
cruise
stinks.
controlling it.
He stinks. and it's sad.
He can't get any worse, though. He's a rising stock from here.
And also, it's not just Andrew Wiggins. It's you have Jeff Teague on that roster. You have Gorgie Jang on that salary payroll. It's for Minnesota, I love Karl Anthony Towns. He is awesome.
Yeah.
But everything else there, besides maybe Ryan Saunders in the new front office, besides that, I don't know.
So you guys are both kind of leaning Mavs in my question.
Probably. I do think there is a chance yes, there's a lot of sunk cost on the Wolves' books going forward here, but I am encouraged about the front office and the approach they're taking, kind of leaning into Towns as being just the focal point of everything they do, which is crazy to say that they didn't do before.
Right.
And I do think there is a timeline where 5 years from now they are a Colossus.
I'm going to ask a couple of more quick-fire questions as we wrap this up. This has been Group Chat, by the way, and we have a ton of other NBA Palooza stuff going for you for the rest of the day, and then we have the games at night to watch. So here's a couple quick-fire questions. Who's going to be better this season, the Bulls or the Hawks?
Bulls. I think the Hawks are way too soon to really jump on that bandwagon.
Bulls.
Yeah.
Hawks. I definitely.
Wow.
I just think that everybody's this Bulls thing is bizarre to me. Jim Boylan was a punchline last year, and now all of a sudden we're like, I don't know, he's got himself a good little team here. Zach LaVine, like, no disrespect, sucks. Like, Zach LaVine is like empty. Like, everybody who used to kill guys like Zach LaVine on other teams, but for Chicago, we're kind of like, oh, he's an interesting player. You know, Zach LaVine can play a little point. Like, I don't think so, man. I think Kobe is going to be good, Kobe White, but I don't get this Bulls team at all.
They're just like super competent, which is all you really need to be.
I don't know. I
in
feel
the
like
East.
they're like a little bit better than the Wizards. I just like feel like I don't get this Bulls thing at all. The Hawks make sense to me.
Yeah.
With Chicago, they're at least going to put up a lot of points this season. And I think if Wendell Carter can stay healthy this season, you have a really interesting front court with Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter. You have guys who can get buckets for you, like you mentioned, White. LaVine, I mean, he's got his flaws. I'm not a big fan, but there's no denying that dude can score. At least then Otto Porter, who you didn't mention, a really good two-way player to help stabilize that. Whereas with Atlanta, look, I like Trae Young, but he still needs to prove that he can be a knockdown three-point shooter.
I guess
off
this is
the
probably
dribble.
aesthetic bias because I just would rather watch Atlanta.
I would rather watch Atlanta too.
Let's talk about these last few teams here. It's the fast-forward teams. It's the teams that probably are like, they're thinking more about their front office than their on-the-court product. They're thinking more about how do we rebuild this thing? How do we get out of where we are? And that's sad because there's a couple really good players down here. Devin Booker on the Suns, Kevin Love on the Cavs, Beal on the Wizards, obviously, and somebody who I can't think of on the Hornets.
Terry Rozier.
Terry Rozier, scary
Cody
Terry.
Zeller, yeah.
I
And
agree
Ken
with you,
Gilchrist,
Kevin,
your
that
favorite.
Charlotte is the probably the worst situation in the NBA right now.
Let me curve here. Let me zag a little bit.
Okay.
So we talk about hipster teams in the NBA constantly, right? What if the Hornets are actually the hipster team? Because we're always, the definition of a hipster NBA team is like the
Yeah, but
team
you have
on
to
the
like
rise.
to be hipster, you have to like want to watch it.
Yeah, I know, but I think the hipster move this year is to be like, oh, actually, Terry Rozier running the pick and roll with Cody Zeller. That's the move.
No, that's avant-garde. That's like I like to listen to nothing but tape feedback and like microphones being shoved inside of amplifiers.
I mean, what are the Charlotte Hornets if not an art installation?
I don't know. I can't. It'll be a miracle. I think that I will probably spend more time watching like Friends this year than I do watching the Charlotte Hornets. Like that. That's not even that hard of the thing to say.
Would it shock you if Washington was solid? They made a run at the 7 or 8 seed. Let's say Beal has another awesome season. Rui Hachimura is pretty good as a rookie scoring the ball. And Isaiah
would
Thomas
shock
comes
me.
back. It would shock you?
It would shock me.
Okay.
It would shock
So
me.
there's nobody from that bottom group, in the East, Cavs, Wizards, Hornets, that you feel like could somehow outperform
No, I think that this bottom
expectations?
four is the bottom four.
Okay.
Yeah.
In New York, who we didn't mention. The
Yeah,
group above,
yeah.
I mean, are they a team that you think could be better than expected?
I think that New York is the interesting team here too because of how they could wedge themselves into so many conversations with dealing guys in the middle of the season.
I think the question for New York is whether or not they fight other teams or they fight each other, because there's a possibility with this team where like playing time just becomes a huge issue, where guys like Marcus Morris, Taj Gibson, who are already playing for their second contract because their second year isn't guaranteed,
Right.
like whether or not they're going to be okay with like giving minutes over to RJ Barrett and some of those younger guys. At the same time, Marcus Morris is already doinking guys with the ball
that
on the
was
other
awesome.
team.
Yeah.
And just like if they just lean into this identity as like old school Knicks basketball, I can see that having some sort of effect.
It's almost sort of the total opposite of the Memphis Grizzlies, where all those young pieces just fit together so well.
Right.
Right. Your
Right.
John Morant running point, Jaren Jackson or Brandon Clark
Right.
screening for him. I mean,
love it.
that fit there is so,
You guys
so fun
like
to watch.
seriously?
I love
the
it.
Grizz? But the Grizz are gonna get stomped this
Who
year.
cares?
Yeah, I
You
know, but I
wanna
just but, like
lose.
the way that we're talking about do you think that the Grizzlies are gonna be better than the Hawks?
No.
I mean, no, because they're in the West. They're
okay,
they,
yeah.
I mean, strength of schedule is ridiculous.
Are the Grizzlies more hipster than the Hawks?
They are
Yes,
now.
they are now.
Hawks
Yeah,
were
yeah.
last year, the Grizzlies are this year.
Yeah, I don't really see anybody out of this group of four, the Phoenix Suns, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Wizards, the Hornets, like rising out of this bottom tier. I think this is pretty much locked up. I just hope but what would be really fascinating as we go through the course of the season is whether or not these guys wind up tanking, because I think that's going to be the memories of the lottery night, which you were present for, and
was fun.
the Pelicans landing Zion ahead of a bunch of teams that thought they had a better shot at him. Is going to be like people are going to forget that as they go through the season. I don't think we're going to see as bad of a tank job this season as we did last season. All right, we have a ton of stuff going on for the rest of the day on the Ringers NBA Palooza. Coming up next, I believe we have the premiere of Take
Yes.
Hunter 4. So
Let's
enjoy
go.
that. We also have sports rewatchables. We have what else we got today? Lakers wine bottle with Bill and a cast of thousands.
Priscilla and Bill
And then Russillo and Bill to take us into Toronto versus New Orleans. For Kevin and for Justin, I am Chris. Thank you so much for watching Group Chat Live. Enjoy Take Hunter 4. Thanks to everybody here in behind the glass.